Hello, Julie Chance with Action Strategies by Design. And today we're going to look at the Colleagues feature on Catalyst. Colleagues is one of the most used features on the platform, and it's one that I hear from a lot of participants that they feel like it's very valuable and they get a lot of insight from it. And at the same time, there's so much information there that they're not really quite sure how to use it or how to approach it. So today we're going to walk through that. The colleagues section can be accessed from the home page here where it says compare to a colleague, and it will take you to this page. Today I'm going to compare to a hypothetical colleague named Sammy Smith, and we'll see the first thing that we come to is, and what I recommend is that leaders sit down with their team members, the people that report to them, and use the colleagues function on Catalyst to really have a discussion. Have a discussion around what your differences and similars are and the information in Catalyst. I also recommend that team members meet with each other. These don't have to be long conversations. They can be anywhere from 5 to 20, 30-minute conversations, just depending on how in depth they want to go and how much time's available. And that and maybe when maybe you're assigned to a new team, or for organizations that use this very broadly, when there's maybe a matrix or a project task or something, it's another great time to use this functionality. So the first thing we see is I see what Sammy cares about, when to pull Sammy in, which is really what he's good at, right? What his strengths are, and what may stress Sammy. And Sammy's going to pull up me in his colleagues platform, and he's going to see that same information about me. So we can have a dialogue around that. We can talk about, for instance, Sammy, give me an example of a time at work where being insistent has been difficult for you. Tell me what that looks like for you. Or tell me what it feels like for you to be working with people who are unpredictable or where there's a lot of changes. And then he can ask the same things of me. Then we'll take a look at our maps together. And as you can see, Sammy and I are pretty much on opposite um, ends of the spectrum. We are on diagonally. He is an S style and I am a D style. So we're on the corners of the map, if you will, opposite corners of the map, if you will. And we can see what Sammy prioritizes and what I prioritize, and talk a little bit about how that plays out in our work together. I might ask him, so when I push for results, how does that feel to you? And he might ask me about what collaborating's like, or what when I have to provide a lot of support, what that's like for me. And then we're going to go down to similarities and differences. And similarities and differences are one of the areas that I really like people to explore together, especially the similarities part, because we trust people who are similar to us. And when personalities are as different as Sammy and I are, oftentimes it feels like we don't have anything in common, that we don't have any similarities. And in fact, we have a number of similarities, even given those opposite opposite corners of the DiSC map. So we're both positive, calm, reserved, and neither of us need much structure. That could be good or bad in working together. However, it is good to understand those things in terms of building trust. And then we want to look at the differences, because differences, when we can begin to understand and appreciate and value differences, that's when we really begin to work together effectively, and we understand how the differences influence the strengths that we bring to the team, and begin to recognize those as strengths and to really value those differences. And a workshop participant one time said to me, "Oh, I get what valuing differences is. It's when that person, whatever that person does, in this case, it might be, for me, it might be, I get what valuing differences is. It's when Sammy retreats or needs that emotional support or is able to provide some emotional support, even though that might frustrate me. um, I get it and I understand how valuable that is to the team. Or when Sammy wants to slow things down, when he feels we're going too fast, it still irritates me. And I value the fact that he does that because it's typically what the team really needs right then. Then we're going to drop down to the tendencies. And what I like to do with the tendencies is there's a lot of them. Would take a lot of time to go through all of them and might be overwhelming. So I like to look at two, maybe three at the most. And I picked those two or three based on a couple of things. One is where we're the furthest apart. And another criteria I use is which one really plays out and impacts our day-to-day work together. So where Sammy and I are furthest apart is accommodating and strong-willed. And so I'm going to drop down the details on that. And you'll see that I tend to overlook advice and input from others, which is true if I'm not really paying attention and being intentional about listening and hearing what other people are saying. While Sammy tends to welcome input and advice from others. So would talk a little bit about how we can support and balance each other in that, how maybe I can be a little bit more open and receptive, and maybe how Sammy at times needs to um, step in and make a decision without getting a lot of advice. So we can talk about how these are strengths and at other time weaknesses and when we might need to use them. Um, and I need to really understand, Sammy needs to understand that I sometimes come across as stubborn and that it's okay for somebody to question that. I'm okay with that. And maybe he needs to step out of his comfort zone a little bit and do that. And at the same time, I need to recognize that my ideas aren't always the best ideas and be willing to set aside my ideas and listen. So that understanding of where we're coming from and how far apart we are on that continuum can really help improve our working relationship. And then the other one that I want to look at for Sammy and I is fast-paced and steady pace. Because I think pace is one of those areas when there is a difference that can really impact working relationships. And the details there are, well, I prefer to work at a rapid pace. He prefers to work at a more measured pace. So when I'm working with Sammy, I need to remember to slow it down a little bit, and maybe he needs to step out of his comfort zone a little bit and speed it up from time to time when he's working with me. And we need to talk about that and understand that we have different paces. And if he feels that things are just going too fast, to step up and say, hey, I really feel like we're moving too fast here. Or I might say something like, I know that you feel like we need to slow this down a little bit, but there really is some urgency, and I feel like we need to continue moving forward. Um, the other thing that I need to keep in mind is that I'm energized by flurries of activity and tight deadlines. While that really is something that Sammy dislikes, so not to assume that because it's okay for me and I like that, that it's okay to create those situations with Sammy. I need to be able to moderate that just a little bit. And then if there's time, I suggest that people drop down and choose one. Tension, connecting, collaboration, or buy-in. And for the sake of this activity, I'm going to select buy-in. And here's some of the things that, how I might benefit the buy-in process between Sammy and I is when we're working together is my skepticism could help uncover potential problems, and I might be able to help Sammy see how my ideas support long-term goals. Um, and then Sammy would have a different set of information that he's looking at, and we'd be able to discuss both the benefits from my perspective and his perspective and what some of the roadblocks to that are. And then there's some tips for working with Sammy in this particular situation. He would have tips for working with me. So I need to explain the rationale for any concerns that I may have and show Sammy that I've considered the practical implications of the idea, right? And he's going to have a different set of tips that he can talk about and tell me about and ask me, would that be helpful? So that's a quick overview of the colleagues function and the types of conversations that you might have using that.